Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here, and today I'll be bringing you the second game of the first round of our Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition escalation campaign. It's called Deathfang Valley. It was set up by a local player. There's 3 of us in the group, so this is going to be the final game for me in round 1. So let's get to it right away. You've seen my army before, but just as a quick recap, I'm using vampire counts. We're starting off at 400 points. And the first round scenario specifies that 75% of my points has to be spent on core troops. So if you're wondering why I've set my army up like that, that's some of the reason why. Anyway, I've got my level 1 Necromancer with the Ruby Ring of Ruin. That's Ethrek Crowfather right there. We have the Dwellers Below. That is 20 ghouls with no command. We have the Doom Hunters, 10 skeletons with a champion and a musician. That's the old Cursed Company Dogs of War unit that you see there. And we have the Grim Omens, my 5 direwolves. My second opponent is using the Tomb Kings of Khemri. It's an army that I haven't faced in a while. Those of you who are interested in Tomb Kings in Warhammer 8th edition, you're in for a rough ride. They're really hard to get hold of nowadays because Games Workshop has discontinued producing those models. But he's making an effort. He's going to try and put together a Tomb King's army slowly over the next couple of months. And here we see the first stage of that army. He has 3 Tomb King chariots over there. I don't believe they have any command. He has 20 skeleton warriors with, I believe, a standard and a champion. Inside that unit, he has his Lich Priest. His Lich Priest is a level 1, and he has the Ruby Ring of Ruin. So we're thinking along similar lines for this first round. Yeah, both of us have taken a level 1 with that bound fireball spell. And then over on the right, he has 10 skeleton archers. You may notice the battlefield is a little bit different for this game. We roll randomly for 3 pieces of terrain. We rolled all walls. These are all the exact same thing. They are just a series of 6-inch wall sections. And so it's kind of made this interesting maze-like battlefield, which I think is actually pretty cool. However, you'll notice that row of hedges along the left-hand side of the board. My opponent got to place 1 set of 3 wall sections, and I got to place 2. So he doesn't like the wall sections. He doesn't need his chariots trying to charge over these things and taking a lot of damage as they go over them. So he just wanted them out of the way. I wanted them right in the center of the battlefield. So anyway, for that weird section over there on the left, that's my opponent's doing. You can see our deployment here. I've got my ghouls kind of left center. The direwolves are back and off to the left, and my skeletons with my necromancer off to the right. So he's put his chariots way off on the left, and his skeletons sort of right next to them, and his archers a bit over on the right. So here is my first turn. I get the first turn, and I go ahead and I advance up my ghouls and my skeletons. He's got archers, he's got the ruby ring. I need to close the distance. I'm going to try and use those walls to get between those chariots and my troops. The last thing I want is the chariots charging into my skeleton unit. I think they're pretty safe where they're at. I've also learned a little bit from my previous 2 games. So I didn't vanguard up the direwolves, and I am holding them back. I am not sending them out to go attack, say, the archers or make an assassination run on his Lich Priest. I am keeping them in reserve, and the idea there is that when the time comes, when the critical moment approaches, and I'm going to move up those ghouls getting ready for a charge, because I believe those ghouls can take out either of those 2 skeleton units that he has, those skeleton infantry units. But what I don't want to face is the chariot charge. And so those dire wolves are just going to hang back a little bit, and in a key moment they are going to dart forward, and they're just going to stand in front of those chariots. They're going to redirect them, they're going to take that charge. They're almost certainly going to all get destroyed, but the hope is that I will keep them busy at a critical turn, and then my forces can overwhelm his in the middle. So it's my magic phase, and I go ahead and I start off with the Ruby Ring, because the only other spell that I have is Invocation of Nehek, and there's no one hurt, so there's no one to heal back. His spells, by the way, his single spell is the Incantation of Righteous Smiting, I believe, which gives all his troops +1 attack. The lore attribute also does heal his models, so there is that as well. Anyway, I go ahead and I take my dice and I throw the Ruby Ring of Ruin at those skeleton chariots, and I get Irresistible Force, which, yeah, it's not what I would have rather have had done. On the one hand, it does roll pretty well and does destroy a chariot, which is great. On the other hand, that Ruby Ring destroys itself, and it's gone for the rest of the battle. So there goes all of my ranged threat. It also means that I only have one spell, so he can just concentrate on dispelling the one spell that he needs. Anyway, even though I did kill off that chariot, which is great, there's also every possibility that he's just going to heal it back in rounds to come. I mean, all he has to do is get his one incantation of Righteous Smiting spell off, and it'll heal back at least one wound, and that chariot will reappear, which is not great. So it's my opponent's turn, and he doesn't see any reason to move up really fast, especially since I've just gone and blown up my only threat at range. So he shuffles around a little bit, and he uses his ruby ring, which doesn't miscast and explode, and he goes and he fires it at my direwolves. Now I have a choice. I can try and dispel that, or I can wait for the incantation to come. So I kind of do the math, and I kind of think those direwolves are going to be okay. The moment where they need to go and sacrifice themselves is coming up quickly. He's probably going to do an average of 1 or 2 wounds. I should be fine. I let the ruby ring go through with the intention of stopping the incantation. Well, the ruby ring rolls pretty well, and it blows up 4 direwolves, which hurts. I do manage to dispel the incantation, so that one chariot doesn't come back. But it means that he now has a shooting phase where he gets to take his skeleton archers and his charioteers, and they get to go, and they're not firing a whole bunch of shots. They don't have great ballistic skill. They always hit on 5s, but it's not fantastic. Anyway, they do get the 1 wound through that they need, and they go and pick off that last dire wolf. So my protection against those chariots has kind of disappeared. So I'm already looking like I'm in a tough spot. Well, now I really don't have any option other than to go forward and advance. I need to get into combat with these guys, otherwise I'm just going to get shot and blasted, and it's not going to be a very fun game for me. So I move up. I try to shuffle around, so I can't really keep those chariots out of my flank if I'm going to go and get those skeleton warriors. What I probably should have done, in hindsight, is move directly towards the chariots, tempted them into a frontal charge, because chances are those ghouls, they'd get really hurt. But I can try to heal them back, and they'll probably destroy the chariot over time. What I do instead is I try and kind of have the best of all worlds. I'm going to advance on the skeletons, and I'm going to have them sort of sneak along that wall over there, so that if the chariots want to charge my flank, which is what they would be doing at this time, they'd have to go over the wall. And there's at least a chance that they're going to fail their dangerous terrain test, and they're going to take a bucket of wounds. And then, one chariot I can handle. But this is kind of me doing the thing where things are going badly, so I'm kind of trying to take gambles. I'm trying to pull things back around by saying, well, if I get lucky, if this happens, and then this set of dice rolls goes in my favor, then I can start coming back to a point where I can start winning again. In my magic phase, I don't have anyone to heal, so I don't cast any spells. Okay, it's my opponent's turn, and in his movement, yeah, sure enough, he's going to move. He's not going to charge my ghouls. He's going to take those chariots and move them further off to the flank. He's also seeing the writing on the wall, so his Lich Priest is going to leave that Skeleton Warrior unit because he doesn't want to get stuck in there when ghouls start tearing people apart. Also, I don't have a magic missile spell anymore, so he's got no threat from being out on his own. He knows I'm not going to pick him off. His Skeleton Warriors move up a touch, and everyone just kind of shuffles around. He goes and casts the Ruby Ring of Ruin on my ghouls, and again rolls really well, so he manages to kill off 5 ghouls, which just really hurts. I do manage to dispel the incantation of Righteous Smiting again, so that those wounds on the chariot are still there, and in his shooting phase, he manages to pick off 1 more ghoul. So you can see that die on the base that I've got of those ghouls coming out of the ground. That indicates how many of those are dead. Okay, so we got to do it. It's my turn again, and I really don't have any good options other than to go and charge those ghouls into that skeletons and hope that they can tear those guys apart, because I am losing ghouls at a surprising rate. Fortunately, and this may sound a little strange, I roll a double 1 for my magic phase, so I only get 2 dice, but that means he only gets 1. What I definitely didn't want would be like a double 6, where I'm going to throw 6 dice at a spell, risk a miscast, and he can throw 6 dice to dispel it. So I get 2 dice to try and cast Invocation of Nehek. He only gets 1 die to dispel it. I get the spell off. He doesn't manage to dispel it. So great. All the ghouls come back. So now it's looking a little bit better in this combat. I'm probably not going to kill all these skeletons, but I'm certainly in a better position than I was a moment ago. And this is more good news. In the combat phase, he does no damage to me. That ghoul toughness of 4 is really helping out. And with the casualties I cause and the charge and the ranks and all that, I manage to kill a total of 8 skeleton warriors, which isn't quite where I need to be, but it's a good start. Because wouldn't you know it, here come the chariots. So a couple things. I knew this was going to come. The chariots are only strength 4, so the ghoul's toughness of 4. I might be okay here. They lost a lot of skeletons in that previous combat phase. All I need to do is I need to keep that incantation of righteous smiting from happening, because if that happens, then he gets another skeletal chariot, which will give him another set of impact hits. It'll also give him all those extra attacks, and he'll give all those models in combat, and he'll also heal the skeletons, and he'll give all those models in combat an extra attack, which means that those ghouls will be in a lot of trouble. So to start off his magic phase, he uses the Ruby Ring of Ruin, and as I've been doing the whole game, I have been just letting that spell go, because I need to stop the incantation. So he casts it at my skeletons, which is the only viable target. He kills 2 of them. But then he goes and rolls Irresistible Force for the incantation of Righteous Smiting, and I can't do anything about that. So yeah, Chariot comes back, some skeletons come back, they all get an extra attack. His miscast is nothing of any consequence. He loses the rest of his power dice, of which he had none. So yeah, his skeleton archers pile on the hurt and gun down 3 more of my skeletons. And between the impact hits and all the attacks and all that kind of thing, he does exactly the amount he needs to completely wipe out my ghoul unit. So there goes my big combat block. You know, if like one of them had survived, that would have given me a little bit of a shot, because then he would have been, it wouldn't have been great because he still had those extra attacks from the incantation, but it would give me an opportunity to regrow the unit. He wouldn't have had the impact hits the next round. I might have been able to, you know, claw through a little bit more, but no, he got him exactly, and so that's that unit is gone, and this game is more or less over, or so I thought at the time. You can see that on their way out, the ghouls have killed 4 of his skeleton warriors, and he put 1 wound on a chariot. However, at the end of that combat, my opponent did go and reform his troops to try and hunt down the remaining of my number of my skeletons, and I saw myself an opportunity. If I go and I take my skeletons and charge his, I could get an overrun that would not only bring me out of line of sight of his remaining troops, but it could also send me straight into combat with his Lich Priest. And once his Lich Priest is dead, then all of his troops start to crumble away and die. So even though this is desperate times here, I have an opportunity. All I need to do is get lucky in this combat phase. You know, I need to regrow some of my skeletons, I need to kill off a bunch of his skeletons and survive the return attacks, and then I need to roll far enough to get into his Lich Priest, and then maybe I can start turning stuff around. So, first stage of the plan goes off without a hitch. I do roll well enough to make that charge, so I thunder in to this thin line, this thin white line that he's got protecting his Lich Priest. And then we go into my magic phase, and oops, so I roll my second miscast of the game, and I get the little explosion template. Okay, so this looks bad, obviously, so I'm going to blow up a bunch of my guys, but I'm also going to blow up a bunch of his. The timing of it doesn't work out great, because I'm going to heal back my skeletons, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to kill off a bunch of them. It'd been better if I killed them off and then healed them up, but that's not the way it works. So anyway, I blow up 6 of my own skeletons. I kill 4 of his, but honestly, this might actually get me closer to what I need, because I need to wipe this unit out. I'm already getting a charge. I just need to cause well, obviously, ideally, I would cause 2 wounds. I'd blow through that unit, and I'd be straight over into his Lich Priest. This could be okay. But it is not to be. I go and I swing with all my attacks and I don't cause a single wound. In return, now remember, he's got a champion and a standard in there, so he's got 5 regular skeleton attacks. He just goes and just murders my necromancer. He just straight rolls, I'll put my attacks in your necromancer. He just gets the 2 wounds that he needs. So yeah, there will be no me storming through his units to go take on his Lich Priest. He just kills my necromancer, that unit dissolves, and the game is over. So it's another shocking loss for me in the Deathfang Valley campaign. Now, this isn't great. It's not a fantastic start. I do get 1 point of lore, which, you know, if you've listened to my previous video, it means I can spend a couple of points in the big mega battle that'll come at the very end of this thing. And I do get a point of lore for every 20% points-wise of my army that I have painted. Now, I have a fully painted army, so I am going to pick up 5 lore from that. So I'll end up with 5 lore for painting and 1 lore for each of my losses. So I'll have 7 lore. So I'll have 7 points to spend, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it will add up as time goes on. My opponent, the Tomb King's opponent, he's going to get a victory from me, a loss from my previous opponent. I think he has like 20% of his army painted, so he'll actually end up about the same. So at least I think I'm tied for last place. The Goblin player, he has picked up full points for painting, and he got 2 wins, so he's rockets ahead with 15 points. If you're curious about how, now I know I've already basically told you this, but if you're curious about how the game against the Goblin player and the Tomb Kings player went, well, they played one game and the Goblin player just crushed it. He absolutely, yeah, he came away with a big win, and so it was very nice. And so they had a little bit of time because I was setting something up at the time. They said, hey, let's play another game. Now the rule is you can only count one game against each player. So if you get a win against one player, playing again won't really get you anything. But the player that lost, if they lose one game and then like tie or win, they can choose the better result and count that score. So they played again, see if they can't get a little extra points for the Tomb Kings player. Well, the exact same thing happened. The Goblin player stomped all over the Tomb Kings player. It was interesting. I think the Tomb Kings player played it 2 different ways. The first game he tried moving up aggressively, using those chariots, coming straight at those goblins, and I think the fanatics kind of wrecked him. The second game he held back. He kind of defended a little area and tried to counterpunch with the chariots and use his magic to his advantage. It didn't matter. The goblins just swarmed all over him anyway. So there it is. The goblins are up on top in the first round of this campaign. The vampire counts are struggling. I will freely admit that. But we're going to go up another 100 points. I already have some ideas on what I'm going to be using. I've started painting them. It'll be a slightly different scenario. Hopefully we'll bring that to you. Let's see, I think the games will be played early September, so sometime in September you should see those battle reports. I hope you enjoyed these. I'm going to keep doing them. Let me know if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, and I will see you on the next one.